The event today is, as some of you may know, it's part of a series that we call Ciceron MBA. MBA standing for Marketing, Breakfast, and Action. And so what we're trying to do is bring together people who have expertise that all of you would love to hear from. There's no pitches. Well, I can't promise I won't say, hire Ciceron at the end of the deal. I mean, it is a free breakfast after all, but anyways. But really to hear from people who are both at the mountaintops and in the trenches, sometimes on a daily basis. And today we have just an amazing pair of people who have been working very closely together for many, many months on a very large site redesign, and really it's much larger than that for Children's Hospital. So before we get into the details, let me just, first of all, we do have the hashtag Ciceron MBA, because brand disruption is kind of big and it takes up like 149 characters alone. So please, if you would, use Ciceron MBA as your hashtag. And what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes to talk a little bit about what a customer journey is. Today we're talking about how we go about preparing ourselves, our organizations, and our teams to really turn the mirror away from ourselves and to our customers. And I hate the term us versus them, but that's really oftentimes what these projects become all about. How do we make this less about us, about what we want, and more and almost entirely about the people who are going to be engaging with either a website or an application or marketing. This is not just for websites. This really is across all the spectrum, and sometimes even physical spectrum, like retail environments and so forth. Because as we talk about today, the journey it's not all behind a screen. And so today we're really trying to get ourselves out of this us versus them and really all about them. And what do we need to do to develop processes, procedures, measurement, and really a sense of empathy to drive all the work that we're trying to do. Ding! Anybody remember film strips? No, probably not. Okay. So, I'm the oldest guy in the room. All right. So here's all the pretty pieces, if you will, and hopefully if you can see this screen with a little bit larger type. Maybe next time we should have iBobs or something like that be a sponsor so we can hand out glasses. We really take, as a consumer, ourselves through a very complicated and complex process as we make a decision about the brands that we want to engage, whether we're buying from them, volunteering, supporting, and so forth. And so we go through sort of this process, and it's really about need recognition. I have a need. There's something in my life that's missing, and I need something to fill that. Could be a product, could be a service, could be a cause. Most likely these days we recognize that need because we've heard somebody else has it, and I want that. Whether it's through a Facebook feed or through classic word of mouth, this whole idea of advocacy really starts to play into that understanding that I have a need. Then we go through the awareness and consideration. I start to search for it. I've heard specifically about a brand, and so I had this idea of like, how am I going to learn about this? Right? By the way, the events in the past have always been on this side of the room, so I'm totally going to come over here for a second. So once you have sort of made that list of the brands that you want to consider, and you learn about them, and you engage with them, and you read the content, and you subscribe, and you reach out to your network and find out, you finally purchase. It could be purchased, it could be convert, if we want to use the technical term of marketing, engage, whatever that term is. But there's that action that takes place, that moment of truth, where you as the brand, you've won. And from that point, you then have the experience with the product. Sometimes it's a good experience, you hope. Sometimes it's not such a great experience. But the experience with the product is a key part of the customer journey. Because up until the point that you actually have that in your hand, or you're experiencing that product, everything has been either myths, lies, half-truths, full truths, whatever it is. But at that moment, you have it in your hand. And now you're experiencing it. And so then you go, after you use it for a while, we think about this like in the application market, or if you buy an iWatch, or I don't even know if they're calling it the iWatch, I guess, the Apple Watch, right? You've had it for a while, And you go through this value assessment. You say to yourself, was it worth all of that? Was this a good decision that I made? Do I abandon it, or do I keep going with it? And then ultimately, do I become loyal to that brand? And then, in Ciceron's world, do I become an advocate? Will I then go out and tell my story to the world? In which case, hopefully, now that we're so connected, now on average to over 300 people per person on average. There are people I know that I met you this morning that have tens of thousands of people who follow you on Twitter or whatever else, and if you say something about a product, you can make the market move, right? So at the end, we get right back into need recognition. So this is really the world that we live in from a customer journey. There's lots of touch points. Okay, moving ahead to the next slide, here's the problem. Who owns all of these touch points, right? This is the mess that we oftentimes live in as organizations. It touches so many different departments, right? From research for need recognition, right? Well, who needs it out there? Well, let's do some segmentation research. Let's buy a study. Let's do some polling, some surveying to try and find out. So it's a research organization. Awareness and consideration, that's marketing. We own the funnel, right? We're gonna do email campaigns, we're gonna do display campaigns, we're gonna have social media, we're gonna do our websites, all these sorts of things. We have trade shows, retail environments, all this complicated stuff. That's funnel activity, right? Purchase is sort of your POS, your retail environments, obviously your web ops team, the people who handle the transactions. You have product experience, like who makes the product. So you have product managers, engineers, designers, and so forth. And then we have value assessment, like, well, was it good? And so many of us in marketing are so top of the funnel, just more people, more people, more people, that a lot of times this value assessment, nobody's really oftentimes paying attention to that. Or it's something we do every 2-3 years. We try and re-inform us back in. And then loyalty and advocacy is really a burgeoning business. For a long time, word of mouth was something you hoped you got. I hope people are saying good things about us, right? Sure hope that word of mouth is working. Well, hope, if you've known me for a long time, I've always said hope is a really bad business model. And there's so much available to us now to measure that. So as you can see, this is an organizational challenge for the customer journey. So when we get into our panel here, you're going to see, for example, with Children's Hospital, that not all customers are created equal. So you can't say the customer journey. There are lots of different customers. Whether you're a mother with a newborn, you're an employee or a nurse or a doctor or a health practitioner who wants to join an elite children's hospital, or you're a child. You're a child with an illness who all of a sudden didn't expect this in life. Of course, they haven't expected much because they're children, but here they are, right? And to try and learn about living perhaps with a disease or an illness or something that might be with them lifelong, and hopefully not. So there's a better way, okay? And the better way is we're going to learn about in the next hour here. So let me introduce to you, without further ado, to my dear friend, Jen Swanson. Jen I've known now for probably 15 years. First did work with you, I believe, at the Carlson School of Management, where she was in marketing and alumni there, and then at the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and then at Capella, where we did lots of really interesting customer segmentation modeling, and really understanding how learners and alumni interact with each other from an advocacy model. In fact, truth be told, Ciceron became much more of an advocacy firm after the work that we did with Capella. And I've always given, well, I can give you a view, now I'll give the Capella table credit for that. But anyways, it just became very eye-opening because it was very interesting and successful work. And so now Jen is the Director of Digital Marketing at Children's Hospital. To her left is Kristen Finley. And if anybody has known Ciceron for a while, Kristen worked for us back in 1999. The original Geek Girl, right? First woman at Ciceron, yes, in 1999. Worked for us for several years. In fact, one of the major projects we did together was to redo the Hazelden website around 2000, I believe. By the way, it was at the same time I think we were doing work for Cervix, so.
And we had a church.
What?
And we had a church.
And we had a church too, yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a cradle and grave sort of thing going on. And since then, Kristen has been with a variety of brands, including Ameriprise. She spent time at the Bolin Agency and has come back to Ciceron, and we are so happy to have her back. And we hired her to oversee this major project with children's. Of course, I want her there forever, and so we are filling her plate with other things as well. So please welcome my esteemed panel. Why don't we just briefly say a little bit more than what I said about you and this customer journey work, and before we get into our lively discussion.
Well, you covered an awful lot of it in that.
Are we almost done?
Introduction, yeah, pretty much.
Sorry.
I mean, I guess the only thing I would add to that is that, you know, the titles are one thing. I think where I kind of got the customer journey or customer experience bug, and it was way before we were ever calling it that, but really back to, I mean, my background's in higher education. In fact, this stint at Children's is my first job not in higher education in my entire career. And so I started off, you know, doing student activities, planning like big concerts on college campuses. That was super fun, but also probably not a lifelong career. But quickly moved into alumni relations and community relations and all the jobs that have relations in the title, external, corporate, all that kind of thing. And that's nothing but customer experience, right? I mean, it's all about the relationship that people who once were at a university or who feel passionately about a university move on in life and they still want to be passionate about that university. And that's really where I started thinking about sort of how do you program for or market to or engage, again, all words that we weren't using then, but we use now, to really keep people close to an organization, because what we want is for those organizations to be close to their hearts so that they give up their time, give up their money, and that sort of thing. And then really moving into Capella, my time at Capella was a little bit like an unofficial management rotation in that I spent a good portion, a good 3 years in event marketing. Tom Clemens, right over there, my boss at Capella hired me there. But doing, again, event marketing, loyalty marketing, word of mouth marketing, referral marketing, really trying to keep that engagement going after people make a purchase, after people register, after people graduate. And so then after doing that work in marketing, then moving into, I spent a couple years in customer service delivery and actually even back office operations, gave me a whole different perspective. You know, you put up that slide of all the different sort of stages of the customer journey. Let's talk about all of the legacy systems that are behind that, right? You've got, at a university, you've got financial aid management and registration and you know, all the grade records and the learning management systems, some of which talk to each other but not always. And so what I've learned throughout my career is that organizations tend to put an awful lot of barriers between themselves and their customers, right? And so a lot of what I see like my job has been is figuring out how to make the easy stuff easy and the hard stuff hard. So in a university, getting a degree should be hard. Figuring out how to register for and pay for and manage your time, that should not be hard. And as an organization, we should make that easy. So at Children's, we're in the same, it's the same business, right? Like, if you are coming to children's hospitals and clinics, whether it's an emergency or it's a planned visit, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to go look for directions, right? Figure out, how do I get there? Where do I park? Who am I seeing? And that's a very high emotion kind of experience. And so right now, I'll be very honest with you, and I'm sure all of you right now on your phones are going out to look at the childrensmn.org website. We haven't redesigned it yet. That's what we're in progress with. We don't make it easy for people, right? We make it a little bit hard, and we need to make the easy stuff easy, because if you're bringing your kids to Children's for something serious, or maybe even not serious, because those of you with kids know flu shots are serious as hell when you have to go take your 3-year-old to get them, right? It shouldn't be hard to get here. It should be easy to get here, easy to navigate your way through. Let's make the easy stuff easy. And I think that's really kind of how I think about the arc of customer experience as we've all been experiencing it in the industry, but also just within my own career.
So yeah, I think one of the things that Jen and I discovered was we have a similar background in advocacy and loyalty programs, because a lot of what she described. I spent some time at Carlson. Peeps up there, there. Now Amia. And I worked on the Pampers Gifts to Grow program and Delta and some other projects, JetBlue, and learned a lot about advocacy and about loyalty programs and how you want to keep people in that cycle of loyalty. That combined with the time I spent at Ameriprise in web analytics has made a great combination for looking at customer experience, because I spent 3 years measuring lots and lots of data, and everybody wanted to know the silliest stuff, and it was trying to get people to act on the important stuff. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about, is all those data points. So I think that advocacy and loyalty and the measurement have all just made a nice combination to look at this customer experience journey.
So, first of all, we should mention that how long have you been working together on this project?
Since March. February, March.
And
We've achieved mind meld though, just so you know.
yeah, this is true.
Total mind meld,
Yeah.
as you should with a really great like project manager, program manager, total mind meld.
And what's interesting about that is how it's only been recently that you've actually talked about design.
Right. I mean, honestly, the project for us, the web redesign, started last September with research, which we'll talk about here, consumer research. And Craig is over here, yeah,
Julie's
Ian's over there, yeah. I mean, we just have been working on design for what, 2 weeks? So 9 months of prep work to get to design.
So that's something to keep in mind, right? So we're talking about a web design project, but we've been doing this for 9 months, and just over the past 2 weeks we've been talking about design. And so when you talk about, is this easy work, is it hard work? Doing it right takes time.
It does.
And you have to really go through so many different steps. And so one of the first topics we want to talk about is how do you prepare your organization to, because as we all know, people are like, well, what's it going to look like? What's it going to look like? What's the site going to look like? What's the app going to look like? When can I feel it?
What color is the logo going to be?
Oh,
That's my
yeah,
favorite one.
right? Sorry, you're going to have to wait 9 months, right? So what have you had to do to sort of prepare the organization and ask the questions to get them in the right frame of mind to do something that truly is customer-centric?
Well, I mean, in some ways, it hasn't been as hard to do that evangelizing as I think it is in some organizations. And here's why. So when I started, I've been at Children's just about 1.5 years, and when I started, the organization had really already started to make that investment and started to turn their head towards really thinking about the patient experience. And when we say patient experience, we mean patient and family experience. It's just that that's a lot of syllables. So sometimes we shorten it to the patient experience. Because those family members, obviously for very young children, the patient is the family, right? And so Children's as a whole had really started to make some investments, thinking about how do we transform the care experience, the clinical experience. So it wasn't like I came in and started using words that were totally foreign to this population. I think what was new for this group was thinking about the web as a business tool. The web was always something we just sort of did over in marketing and nobody really cared about. We had some IT resources, but people cared about it. People complained about it. I mean, let me tell you, that was what I heard when I started, is they came, hi, I'm so-and-so, let me tell you what's wrong with our website, right? But they weren't thinking of it as a critical business tool. And I think what I tried to do is start to think about it and talk about it as the web is our front door. Before anybody walks in to a clinic or walks into a hospital or an emergency room, chances are they're going to have seen us on the web, even if only to get driving directions. So that's our front door. And as we start talking about that and start talking about that as being the first experience that can color then all future experiences. So if someone is frustrated coming in, right, getting here, can't figure out where to park, can't figure out how to navigate, what floor to be on, not even really understanding who they're supposed to be there, they're coming in with anxiety, they're coming in with frustration, and already then that tone of that encounter with a physician or a clinician is that much harder to get back on track. And so those were some of the early conversations. But really starting, when I was making the case for the investment in the website, there were a lot of things that were driving that. Some of it was around this idea of a digital front door, but some of it was also just some pretty hard facts around our site is not optimized for mobile. It's not anything for mobile. How do you, and yet our mobile traffic was on pace to overtake desktop pretty quickly. In fact, that happened last month. 6 months ahead of schedule. We thought it was going to happen in about December this year, January next year. It happened in June 2015, 6 months ahead of schedule. So I wish I had the new site up now, but we'll have it in January, right? But having those conversations were really important and really starting to make the case for it, and there was an appetite for it. So that was helpful. But
you know, Kristen, through this project also, you've worked obviously with a lot of different people within the organization, sort of as you've gone through it, especially now that we're getting into design and everybody wants their tab on the homepage.
Yes.
Right?
Every single meeting, someone is asked if they can be on the homepage.
Right. And so as you, even in those discussions, because that's real, right? I mean, that's where this stuff becomes real. How are you preparing them to say, maybe so, maybe not?
A lot of what we talk about is how people get to the information. So like Jen was saying, when you're a parent trying to get to the hospital because your kid is bleeding, that's one experience. But if you have just been diagnosed or your child has just been diagnosed, you might be going to the website and, you know, where's the first place you're going to go? You're going to go to Google and you're going to
Dr. Google, as we call it.
Dr. Google, yeah. So I think when we shared with them that I think it's like 74% of the traffic to Children's does not come to the homepage. They just, what? Because that's what everybody thinks, you start at the homepage. But you know, we say most of your traffic actually comes in from Google and they come to your page. And we're gonna give you an awesome page. And it's gonna be all about your program and it's gonna have all the information somebody needs. And they're not gonna have to deal with the homepage and seeing other messages because it's gonna be all you, because that's how they're coming in. And that gets them really excited. And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, the homepage, I want it to be pretty and I want people to find me, but how are we organizing our content in our section? And then they can really get excited about the ownership and moving it forward.
And there is really strong ownership. I mean, so just for context, it's a 7,000 page site right now, okay? So that tells you kind of the scope.
How many pages have you killed? You killed a lot more
I have
to
killed
get
a
to
lot.
7,000.
I've probably killed about 1,500 since I've been here, which, you know, not bad. Right? I've killed about 100 pages a month, so that's
Yeah,
a
you're like
pretty
the
good
Black
track
Widow
record.
of
I
this
know.
whole thing.
That's interesting. Okay, anyways, but people come to me and say, I need a new website. And I laugh, because I'm like, you don't have a website, you've got a section, right? Like, Children's has a website. So in some ways, the challenge is getting people to think at an enterprise level. And I think I'm skipping ahead to some other stuff, so you can tell me to wait if you want. But, you know, so one of the things that we have figured out through some of our consumer research is for donors. So donors are a really important population, one of our key user groups for the website. We are a nonprofit organization. We rely on philanthropic support from individuals and corporations to do what we do. So what we learned from some of our research was that donors, this won't be a surprise to anyone in the room who works in nonprofit, but donors don't just want to give us their money. They want to give us their time. They want to participate. They want to support. They want to write a check and volunteer. So right now, today, if you wanted to volunteer at Children's, you could go to 3 different pages on our website. You could go to the giving, the foundation area, and volunteer with something like Heartbeat 5000 or one of our charitable walks or events and things like that. If you want to volunteer as an advocate for us at the state legislature, you could go to the advocacy and health policy section and sign up to be an advocate there. And if you wanted to volunteer in clinic or in hospital at like the welcome desk or in the NICU, you would go to volunteer services and apply there. Our website is an org chart, right? I mean, that's what it is. And so we have not thought as an enterprise. We haven't thought about the consumer to say, if I want to volunteer, guess what? I want to see all my options in one place. So that's one of the big shifts that we're seeing with this redesign is that we're going to have volunteer services, the foundation, and the advocacy team work together to present content in a unified manner that doesn't start with, yeah, but that's not how we do it in our department, or we do it a little different over here. No. How does the consumer expect to experience you, which is to go and say, I'd like to volunteer, what are my options? And to have that menu of options there, and then to go in and say, okay, I recognize that an application to be a volunteer in the NICU, of course, is going to look different than signing up to be an advocate at the state legislature. That's an expected level of detail that the consumer is ready to do, but don't make them go look for it in 3 different places. And those are really the kind of shifts that have been hard and easy because we've done all the work, right? Because we've got the data. to go and say, look, this is how we do it today and it's not working. This is how we're going to do it tomorrow and it's going to require that we work differently and that we think differently, but here's why. And when you have that data, the decisions and the discussions get much easier. So, to Kristen's point, when we say 73% comes in from, directly from Google, they go, oh, gosh, I didn't know that. Okay, great. And then they're there. But that data and that information and those insights help those conversations so that it goes from being a hard discussion to an easy one.
I think what you start to see happen, and on this project, like Jen was saying, she was a little bit ahead because the organization had already started talking about the experience and some of that language. And in other projects I've seen, there's this realization that digital is where all of your worlds collide, where you have, suddenly the org chart and the silos, which we all talk about silos, they just don't matter and you can't function. So you see these moments where people realize, oh, it is complicated to find 3 different places to volunteer. And oh my gosh, they're coming to a website where they have to figure all of that out in one place. So I think as people start to look out and realize that their organization is interacting, all of these pieces are coming together and it's all in one place on digital. As people start to get that, it really changes their perspective. And then you have the research. And I was lucky to join this project when Ciceron and Julie and some other staff at Ciceron had done this great research. So once you get them kind of thinking that way, and then you can slide in the research to say this is what's happening, then people can really get excited about it.
So before we get to facts, because blah, facts, let's go to the next slide, which is really about the power of anecdotes, right? Because at some point you say, all right, you think you're so hot, go and try and find yourself, right? Or take out your mobile phone and go and do that we say the consumer can't do. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, so this is, I'm really sorry to all of the children's people who have heard me tell these stories 19 times. I'm just going to warn you on that one. But, so I had a meeting with our chief medical officer, Dr. Phil Keyboard, who is an amazing, funny, brilliant man who has spent a lifetime as a pediatrician. Could not have more respect for him if I tried. But he oversees all of our clinical teams, and that's a huge part of our website, right? All of our clinical departments and areas of expertise and all of our doctors and everything, that all reports up through Phil. So I'm in his office and I've got the plan for the web redesign, and I'm there because I'm doing some pre-selling, right? Some of the evangelizing you have to do is in 100 tiny meetings, right? Of
softening the targets.
Softening the targets, that's right. And so, so I'm in a meeting with him. I've got 30 minutes. In fact, I think Teresa was there with me. And I'm laying out my plan and why he should be on board for this expensive endeavor we are about to undertake, which is probably going to upset a few of his apple carts. And I start off talking about how, why responsive design matters. And I know Phil probably doesn't know what responsive design means. So I've got a slide and I say, so I just, I know you're a big smartphone user, Phil, but I just want to make sure you understand the difference between a responsive website and an app. And he looked at me and goes, good, because I don't know the difference. And I said, a responsive website is a website on a browser that looks good no matter how you're accessing it, phone, tablet, or desktop. An app is something you download. And he literally pulls out his phone and he pulls up our website and he goes, oh God, that's why our website, he's doing this, right? You all know what that is, right? The squeeze and the, he says, oh, I thought you were gonna design an app. You're gonna design a website. And I said, yeah. And he was like, cool, right? I mean, he was there. But even just starting at that moment of let's just strip away, he's brilliant, right? He's much smarter than I am. But that difference, assuming he would have understood what a responsive website versus a native app was, getting right down and not being afraid to call those questions on the carpet and say, let's just start from the beginning. A web redesign matters for his, not just from a patient perspective, but he oversees all of the outreach we do to physicians and clinicians across our state, our region, sometimes even nationally, that attract. So if you are a family doc or a a pediatrician in Elstate, Minnesota, and you've got a kid with a condition that you can't treat there, you need to refer in. We have relationships. It's a huge B2B business for us that we have to maintain. And him understanding that that's important not just for the families being able to get here, but for other doctors to be able to easily navigate us so that they can quickly and easily and confidently share children's expertise with the families sitting in their clinics saying, well, I'm going to refer you in and it's going to be okay because you're going to children's. They're the best. And that matters for health professionals, it matters for families. And that moment, I had him. And he has been a tireless champion of the project since.
And without that half hour,
yeah,
you'd be fighting some battles.
I would be, because now when I go to these clinical teams to say, look, this is going to be different, it's going to be okay, but it's going to be different. They've heard about it from people other than me, right? They've heard about it from their leadership, and that matters. I have to say, working in a hospital, that chain of command matters a lot with health professionals, and understanding that culture has been really important to the success of this project so far. It's not just about my peer relationships, but it's also making sure that the senior leadership is talking about it down, because that chain of command really matters in attitudes and culture.
Kristen, do you want to add any color to that in terms of sort of this empathetic, I think of this almost like empathetic and anecdotes, like for example, have you done projects where you've had the customer or the brand on the brand team say, okay, you are going to be persona Sue, and you're going to be persona Jim, and I want you to engage with us and tell us about your experiences. And sometimes like, oh, that's how we do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the anecdotes come from the front lines. So some of the work I did in the past couple years has been with construction, which is a handshake and a thanks business, very much. And what they started seeing is their customers coming to them saying, we're not taking faxes anymore, which blew their mind. Why would you not have a fax machine? Or architects saying...
Do I need to clarify to some people what a fax machine is?
Yeah. Architects are now going completely paperless, so they want all of their information digitally, and the construction companies have to be able to serve it that way. So the marketing and the executive leadership learning those kind of things, like, oh, well, we're not doing paper anymore, or some of their best sales guys who make hit all of their bonuses, hit all the numbers, do all of it via text, because the guys on the site text them, I need this, and boom, they get it. And when they hear things like that, they think, oh my gosh, that's how we're making money, and that's how we're succeeding. And so those anecdotes from the front lines, once they start to hear them and it gets to them, they realize, oh, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that front line piece is really important. So when we started our research, I'm totally ruining your outline.
I think we're almost there.
We're good? All right. I just thought there were slides.
We
or
are.
Something. Okay, it's fine, whatever.
Ding.
Ding. So at Children's, where we started our research actually was not directly with consumers. We started with internal stakeholder groups. So we did about 16 or 17 meetings last September and October, some with individual stakeholders inside of Children's. So this is with clinical teams, it's with people like the front desk staff, we have a family resource center, we've got social workers, we've got, marketing, advocacy, foundation, all different teams all across the organization, all of whom have a stake in what happens on the web. And those were so insightful because they know, right? Your frontline people know what's going on. They know the pain points. And I think the biggest aha moments came from our interview with Kendall Munson, who manages our front desk staff. So we've got 2 hospitals and a handful of clinics, primary care clinics, but the 2 hospitals primarily where we've got these welcome desks. It's the first place that people walking into the hospital encounter, whether you're there for a visit, you're there to visit a patient, welcome desk is where you go, you have to get signed in, you have to get a badge. Kendall came with not physical reams, but like mental reams of the cases of where we had bad information or confusing information or conflicting information. I mean, his team is the team that somebody shows up with a printed page from your website and they're like, this is what you said I was supposed to do. And you look at that and you go, oh my God, I haven't seen that. Like, I didn't even know that was still out there, right? 7,000 pages, that happens. So he came with that and we just were like, I mean, and we still go back to that. We talk about it all the time. Remember, Kendall said X, Y, and Z. They know, that frontline staff know. And if you're thinking about like, geez, how do I get into this? It's expensive, consumer research. Tell you what's not expensive. Sit down with your frontline people and ask them what the problems are. They know. The customer service staff, the people who answer the phones, they know what the challenges are because they're the ones hearing it from the customer. And that was what that did then is that allowed us to narrow and focus our consumer-based research with our different user groups, so that we weren't just like, well, so tell us what you think, right? It was really focused questions. It was cheaper research because we were able to ask specific questions because we had been guided to it by those internal stakeholders.
Where is Julie here? Where's Julie? Where are you? Oh, being so kind out there. Julie did all the research for here. So when the Q&A comes up and you have specific questions about Julie, I'm sure that you'll come out from your dark corner over there.
Yeah.
Yes, and we'll give you a mic and you can get into that as well. So, in terms of the data, one of the things I think is interesting is that you didn't necessarily start with web data, analytics data. I mean, it was certainly a piece of it. When we talk about research in these projects, we oftentimes say, well, what's the analytics saying? And that was really helpful to you as you were building internal stories. Like, for example, most people don't come through the homepage to get to your site. So if you're not on the homepage, it doesn't mean that that's like the gate's closed. A lot of that, or just giving people raw traffic numbers. I know you think you're pretty hot, but
400 people looked at your site last year, right? Your pages last year, or sometimes 20, right? I mean,
it's tough love.
Tough love.
Right. But it's real.
Yeah.
Right, because if you were to make those sort of emotional decisions, I mean, I hate to sound unemotional about this, but they need to know that there were 400 people who visited their page last year.
Right.
They need to know that.
Right.
Because you're not going to over-index spending on that, or maybe they were just so buried.
Right.
And then that's when you matched up the consumer data saying, I would love tons of content about this department, but I can't find it.
Right.
Hence, that's why the 400.
Right.
So that's where data can cause a problem. Kristen, in some of your experience also with data, a lot of those front lines were sales organizations, right? People out in the field. I guess maybe you could talk to that for some folks in the audience who, as you're going through a site redesign or that big decision, should we do an app or not? Or a mobile site or not? Yeah. Talking to salespeople who interact with customers all the time.
Yeah, I spent last summer touring Canada, which there weren't any fires.
You're a hockey fan, you love
and
it.
I play hockey, so it's all good. But we talked for the construction company, I talked to all sorts of different people involved in this, in the construction industry. I talked to the off-road ice truckers, the TV show, and they said it's even worse than that, just so you know. But we spent 3 weeks in Canada going and asking questions to architects and the construction guys. We had these great conversations, and we came back again with all those anecdotes, and we learned a lot about how they interact, either just mobilely, they're out there on their mobile. Some of them, when they're in the far, far northern Canada, have no connection whatsoever, so they have to do all their work before they go up there. We learned all of these interesting things, and we had one where we, with the children's, when we interviewed some of the parents, and we were talking about these beautiful stories we want to write about children, and these great kids who survive and go through all this stuff, and one of the parents said to us, when I'm looking up information, I don't want to see the happy story right away.
Because sometimes they're not in a happy place.
They're not in a happy place, and they don't know if they're going to be that story. So that was just, that's one of those things that has stuck with me, oh my gosh. And we learned those things because we went out and asked.
Yeah, I think for us, we started, if you want to, we've kind of been all around the board, but where we really started this time last year was with web data, right? That's because that's what we had. right? And when I started, we didn't have universal analytics implemented, and we weren't really using Omniture to its full extent, and so we did that work, right? We buckled down, and by we, I mean Ciceron. I have a very small staff. Just to also, I mean, that's another thing, is like internal to Children's, the digital team is about to be 3 full-time folks. We're in a marketing department of about 15 or 16, I lose track sometimes. And so Ciceron for us is really our digital team. So all of our search is managed through Ciceron. I'm not plugging, I've just kind of given facts of kind of how we leverage Ciceron as a sort of a back office to really manage a lot of the sort of meat and potatoes of the digital work, because we're just not staffed to handle that internally. And so we sat down with Ciceron and we rolled up our sleeves and did the audits and did the work, looked at search traffic, looked at site traffic, figured out where we've got big leaky holes and plugged them a little bit, and figure out how to clean that up, right? We shored up some things, and we just sort of kept an eye on things. And it wasn't like I was looking at 100 different data points. It was things like returning traffic, which was moving in the wrong direction, right? Site traffic, returning visitors, moving in the wrong direction. Okay, check, that's a problem. Mobile traffic versus desktop. That is quickly on pace to overtake, right? Mobile's on pace to overtake desktop. You don't have a mobile site, check, that's a problem. So things like that, those were the things where we started to go, okay, these are big structural problems that we gotta fix. We're looking at search versus time on site, how many pages, all of that. Okay, site's not organized right, people can't get at the content. Doesn't matter how much paid search we throw at it, that's a problem. And that's where we started. Then move into those stakeholder interviews where we can start to explore a little bit more about the context of those problems, and then to the direct consumer. So, free data. Omniture's not free, but universal analytics, right? That installation at our fingertips, taking time to look at it. Internal stakeholder interviews. The only cost there was time, right? And then then moving into the more expensive direct consumer research, because you've got to pay for the panels and you got to do the analysis. That costs something, but by the time we got there, we knew exactly what we needed to know, right? It was no spaghetti on a wall. It was really narrow.
And that's also a good point to remember, that sometimes data tells the wrong story, right? There were 2 that came up in our conversations that really stuck with me, and that was if you were only looking at things like conversion, right? You could make the conclusion, well, mobile traffic doesn't convert. Well, of course it doesn't, because you have a shitty user experience for mobile, right? Or the other one that I remember is time on site.
That's Kristen's favorite.
Time on site might mean that they are floundering all over the place because they can't find anything, and all of a sudden we're like, woohoo, we increased time on site. Let's make our website more crappy, right? I know you feel passionate about it. You want to say anything about it?
It's basically time on site. So I spent 3 years in analytics, and time on site is one of those that's easy to understand, right? And so in data points, a lot of times you default to the easy to understand stuff, because not all of it is really intuitive. And you don't want to get drowned in 300 different metrics. You want to pick, half a dozen that are good. Time on site just kind of makes me crazy, because when you increase time on site, people assume that's a good thing. Well, it could be that people are floundering out looking for what they need, and they're actually frustrated with you. Or it could be that they have 18 tabs open on their browser like I do, and you're down at the end, and you time out after 30 minutes is generally the standard. So they're not on your site, they're just racking up your minutes. So I think data is important to find a nice balance of ones that are easy to understand, not too many of them, and then some things that actually mean something. But the data, you're right, it never means something on its own. It always has to have context, either data from the previous year, previous month. You have to have a comparison context, or you have to go ask the users.
Right. So which gets to the next slide.
Ding.
Ding. Right. Exactly. Which is getting to the why. Data tells you what, when, where, how, that sort of thing, but it doesn't always tell you why. And so those were some of the important data points that you had to get through stakeholder interviews, research, internal and external, sort of mashing all that up. Talk to me a little bit about that process, how you did it, and if you want to get into details of what tools you used and how you executed against getting that why data, that'd be great.
Now this is when I wish Julie was up here on stage with us. Well, I mean, so she's the other mind meld. She'll just send me the chip implanted in my brain. Pulling together all of that information, I don't know if this is really answering your question. What we got to was a set of user personas. And it's my Bible, right? It's this book where it is, we've done the illustration, right, where you tell the story of the user, whether it's Amy or Sue or Bill or Bob or whatever you want to call it, right, And the story, but kind of what we looked at, it was direct research, right? We did the thing, what went into that was some of the direct research, but also just available research out there. So for example, health professionals was a bad time for us to survey them based on some other things that were happening. There's a ton of information out there about how doctors and nurses are using technology that we were really able to lean into. So what we got to on this persona book was not just the usual sort of story about the family or the physician or the employee or the donor, but it was things like what's important to them, what do they need, what kind of technology do they use? So are they more likely to be accessing us on a smartphone versus a tablet versus a desktop? And when, right? And the other thing that was really helpful for us, it actually came out of, I went to MobCon, sorry, another plug, MobCon, which is a sponsor, right?
Yes, they are.
Look at that. But I went to an event at MobCon last November, and there was a presenter there who was talking about customer journey, not in terms of the point in time they are in the decision, but in the mindset, and that there's like 8 or 10 mindsets that people go through at any given point in time. And they actually can cycle through the mindsets at different points in that actual like physical or spatial journey of making a decision. And it's things like, are they researching, are they purchasing, are they considering, are they browsing? It's this mindset concept. And so I actually went to that conference, I think it was in November. The Ciceron team was in the middle of putting together the personas, and I was like, stop the presses! We've got to pull this information in, because it was so enlightening to think about not just are they a primary care family who has a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, so they're thinking about school immunizations and that kind of thing. But what kind of mindset are they? Is that parent out reading up on the immunizations or trying to understand? Should they get them together? Should they space them out? All of that those are all different mindsets that happen in that same moment. And so how do we think about organizing information to achieve or to be able to fulfill needs, not just based on where they are in the journey, but what mindset they're in at any given moment? That was a very, very that was an epiphany for us. And so pulling that together, that now is our touchstone, right? We make decisions and we pull that book out and we say, okay, this is what we've decided for this section of the site, which predominantly caters to this user persona. Have we hit all of the things that they need? Are we thinking about it in terms of their mindset? Are we thinking of it in terms of their device usage? That sort of thing.
Well, and what's interesting too, around that time, the vaccinate or not vaccinate was blowing up.
Yes.
Online. And so all of a sudden you found yourself, okay, we need to be a lighthouse, right? A beacon of credible information about vaccination. And I'm sure that there are some doctors saying, I can't believe we're even having this conversation. But you had to, right? And you even talking about, you had to urgently put some stuff up online about it.
Yeah, and actually this is the part that kills me about our current site, is we spend so much time worrying about where that content will live. It absolutely drove me up a wall. For the rest of you who manage websites, does that conversation drive you as nuts as it drives me nuts? Who cares where it lives? It's the web, for crying out loud. It can live out in Timbuktu, and if we link to it from this page, everyone will find it just fine. And by the way, search, right? And good content wins out always. So that moment, actually, there was the immunization, there was enterovirus, and Ebola. Because honestly, the amount of traffic we got, Minnesota, kids, about Ebola, you would not even believe,
we were
right?
Hitting the cycle.
Right, man, we were just dying. And actually, out of that, holy trinity of topics last fall, came an idea of how we want to organize some of these hot topics that hit. And they always hit, right? That's what it was last fall. God only knows what it'll be this year. But being able to say, okay, here's the clinical content, here's a video from an expert saying, maybe we all shouldn't freak out about Ebola just yet since it's not even in the US, right? But If it is, here's how we'll handle it, right? But being able to pull together multimedia content from a wide variety of places and being able to put it up and not have to spend even 1 minute having a conversation about where this content will live, awesome, right? That's time I'm getting back in spades once this site goes live, so.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk about in these conversations is all of these audiences, when you develop the personas and you have all this data, all of them are trying to do something, right? They come to your website trying to do something, either find an article or find a doctor or whatever. So if you can keep that in mind as you have all that data and you refer to these personas and you understand they're on their mobile or they're on their way to the hospital looking for directions. It's what are they trying to do when they get to your site? Often just offers some clarity.
And again, the more helpful that experience is, the more calm they enter into the hospital.
The better everybody,
the better
off everyone is, yeah.
It's a health issue, right? I'm not going to start building correlations, thank you very much, in Google Analytics saying,
Andrew's going to take credit for improved hospital outcomes. You heard it here first.
It's the only thing they care about, right?
Right.
Yeah, but anyways, it is so true.
Just one of the things that we think about a lot is that when you are, so those of you who are parents in the room, you go to the doctor, and even if it's stitches, right, scraped knee, or running into the glass top table or whatever it ends up being. You're in the hospital, stressful situation, you're trying to take it all in, you're trying to comfort this child who's freaking out because they just had to have stitches, and you're trying to listen to the doctor or the nurse or the educator tell you the information about, okay, so now you're going to go home and you need to wash it this way and you need to do this and put this on but don't put that on, all that kind of stuff. And you're listening and you're nodding and you're like, okay, yep, okay, got it, okay. And then you leave, you get in the car, buckle the kid in, finally stops crying, and you're like, shit. I have no idea what they just said, right? Now, we have all that information available on our website. Hard to find, but if we can't, so that's on the reactive side of things. Imagine then coming in with, you've gotten a diagnosis from your primary care physician, you're coming in, you haven't slept in 3 days because you don't know, is this like a big deal, a really big deal, or not a big deal, right? You're trying to figure that out. You've done Dr. Google and you're scared to death. And you're coming in and the anxiety is high. Your ability to take in information and engage with the clinician in a meaningful way to be able to get the information you need for your kid, right? The easier we can make that coming in, like if we can do anything on the pre-side of that to bring that anxiety down, that encounter actually is different if we can get out of our own way. And that's ultimately when we think about patients and families, which admittedly is just one of our user groups on I don't want to overshadow that we've got these other user personas that we care about on our site. But obviously this is the corner, this is the center, the core of who we are trying to serve through our website. But if we can start to influence things that way, that's when we really are making a difference on the health side of things, because we're able to support parents and families in a way that then allows them the space to then deal with whatever they got to deal with, right?
All right, let's go to the next topic, and that is that now we have all the data, and now it is only now that you are starting to map it out, right? And you're putting things into wireframes. And we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but it took a lot to even get there. And once you're there, you are now starting to show people this is how the consumer is going to start to interact with us. And we're just talking about boxes and text right now. We're not even talking about pretty pictures, right? And so to prepare the audience, you still will get people saying, yeah, but where's my button?
Yeah, but don't you feel like it's happening less?
It is, yep. The first time we took the wireframe, so again, keeping all the groups engaged, we had many, many meetings, and the people who were involved in the stakeholder interviews got to come back and see where we landed with wireframes. And a lot of times it would be, they'd see the homepage wireframe, and someone came and brought it to me, and they'd written their section into the top navigation, like, we think we should be here. Okay. Yep, okay. And then, we started those conversations about coming in on the homepage and stuff. But now, as they got used to them, as they see them more, they're embracing the whole idea that it's a web, as Jen likes to keep saying. We're gonna make sure you're linked, and they're gonna find you from Google, and so they're getting it, and it's because that Jen took so much time and effort to bring them along the way.
It still happens though, and I think for me, just like a personal reaction to it too is, so when Craig and Kristen brought me the wireframes and I looked at it, I got emotional, number one, right? I cried a little bit. But it was a kind of a release.
Jen does this.
I do, I'm a very emotional person. But it was an emotional release a little bit because all of those months of work on paper, like seeing it on paper. And my reaction when they showed it was, of course. Right, like I didn't look at it, and we're going to change the site in fairly radical and significant ways. And I looked at it and I went, yeah, of course. Because every single placement has like has a consumer insight behind it, right? Like how we're thinking about the top level nav, even what we're calling it. We struggled when, on the first round of navigation. We want to have a section of the site really focused on the very transactional stuff, right? Like getting here, while you're here, what's available, menus in the dining centers, you know, parking, road construction, and, you know, and probably bill pay, to be really honest with you. Really transactional, like just get me to the page I need now, don't screw around. We didn't know what we were going to call that. And so we tried a couple things. Nobody liked anything. Like every meeting we went to, people were like, I love it, I hate it, I love it, I hate it. And we're like, oh Lord. So these guys went out. I think we spent $1,000 for an online panel, 2 versions of an open and a closed card sort, and said, this is all the stuff, what would you call it? And what's the other way? I always get confused.
This is what we're calling it, does it make sense?
This is what we're calling it, what would you add to it? We got to a name, and then the future meetings after that when we heard, we love it, we hate it, we love it, kind of said, kind of doesn't matter, because we got consumer insights that says this is what we're calling it. And all of a sudden everyone else went, okay, right? I mean, like they just, once you have that, the decisions, those hard conversations, the emotional conversations, kind of, it takes the air out of them a little bit. But it is like that's, when I look at those wireframes, I can see, it's, you know, like, beautiful mind or something like that. I can see, not that I have a beautiful mind, but you know where like you can see I can see the data points behind every little box and square and piece of text. It's amazing. And it gives me confidence because some of these conversations are very difficult, but it gives me confidence going into those meetings to say, I know we're doing the right thing by our patients and families. And when I say that to people who do nothing but serve patients and families, they're like, oh, okay, you're on my side, we're good, right? They may still disagree, they may still want to, excuse me, have a conversation about it, but we're on the same side then, right?
So this leads us to sort of our last piece, and then we want to open up for Q&A. That's just some of the you know, we can skip what does it look like, because what is it going to look like? It's going to be blue.
I can't tell you. I will tell you, please come to our website sometime around the second week of January and check us out.
Right, but there are some interesting things about that does get past the, well, what's it going to look like, right? Because you're not talking about subjective design issues, you're still getting people focused on what the consumer needs.
Right, and I mean, some of the stuff we haven't even talked about here today is that a big part of why we're doing this site redesign is not just because of the consumer experience on the front end, but we know what's coming in terms of mobile health, right? We know that we have to fundamentally change how we interact with patients, because whether we like it or not, so we're a hospital, but we get compared to the digital experience people are having at Zappos and at Gap and at you know, Great Clips. I mean, cost cutters now you can call on your way saying, I'd like to get a haircut in 20 minutes, and they put you on the list. We can't even do that at Children's, right? So there's a ton of back office infrastructure that we have to change to be ready for things like online scheduling and telehealth and all of those different things that are coming, whether we like it or not, because that's where healthcare is going. And if we don't make a change now, you know, whether or not the site is responsive is kind of the least of our problems. We got to make these changes on the back end as well. So that whole picture of saying we're going to fix that infrastructure stuff while we're also making it better for the consumers is a, you know, it's a big pill to swallow, but it's easier to swallow because we've got this consumer insight behind it.
So that leads me to a tip that we have, right? And one of the tips that I think that you've done very well is included not just leadership and so forth who can sort of say, no, this is how we're going to do it, but IT. I mean, IT is, and you know, IT is IT, right? I mean, they are sort of in the business of roadblocks.
My dad's here, and he's an IT guy, so let's be
Yeah, but
nice
he
to him,
retired,
okay?
like,
I
this
know,
week.
but let's be nice, right? I mean, he spent 40-some years working in IT, so.
We've had weekly meetings and sometimes 2-a-week meetings since February, March, just to make sure we have decisions and everybody's agreeing, and they've been a huge part of the process.
Yeah.
Because they're going to own it in the end.
They are. They're very much my partners. The role I occupy at Children's has one foot in marketing and one foot in IT, and that's been very clear to me since I started interviewing. And that's great. It's not like that at all organizations, right? And a lot of organizations, marketing's over there, IT's over there, never shall the two meet, right? And that's just not how we can function in this environment. I mean, it's just not realistic anymore. So, and part of it was what was attractive to me about the role, right? Was because there was that relationship, and I knew that the only path to success was to have that relationship. Doesn't mean it's easy. Those meetings have been sometimes very painful, very difficult. I've cried. I'll just own that.
We've gone to the bar afterwards.
We've gone to the bar. We've done a lot of things. And let me tell you, you really haven't cried at work until you've cried in front of a web architect. So I'm just going to put that out there. But you know, we got through it. Like, we powered through. We sang a little kumbaya, and like, it was all good, right? And we came out better for it. And so I have to say, like, there's stuff about this that has not been easy, and that I wish I didn't have to do because it was really hard and stressful and gave me a couple gray hairs up here and a couple back here. But the reality is that we are better for it, the project's better for it, and the site, the health of the site, the future of the site is better for it, right? And in terms of what we're bringing to Children's.
Another tip that I think that you've had that has been good is that you haven't done really big reveals. You've done reveals to the right people along the way. Whether it's research, whether it's insights, wireframes. I think the designs were a bit of a big reveal, but you went to your boss first.
Yeah,
right?
Actually the designs that we're in the process of right now, only marketing has seen. And at this point, only marketing leadership has seen. And I got asked, well, who else are you going to show these to? And I'm pretty intentional on those, that we're not gonna shop those around for input, because that's how you end up with bad design. I mean, we want to kind of keep that tight. And I think when we do have something to show, actual working prototypes, you know, pages that we've built, that's when we'll reveal the design. Because honestly, like, I struggle a little bit with the, like, you know, tabloid-sized pages of like what the site's going to look like, because that's the only time in the entire history of the site that you're ever going to experience it that way, right? Every other time you're going to get in there, you want to click on stuff.
Unless you're driving in your Tesla, in which case you do have like a 11 by 17 flat screen.
Well, right.
I'm talking about your Tesla.
Right. So for the 7 people that's going to be a problem for, we'll solve for it. But everyone else is going to see it on like a small screen, right? They're going to see it on their tablet. I mean, I looked at one of my mock-ups on my tablet just to see how it's going to look, right? Just because I wanted to get that feeling of holding the tablet and seeing it, and what did my finger want to go to, right? Where does my mouse want to go? That's the kind of stuff that will be the big reveal, but the big reveal will be when I have something actually to show, because that's how I think is the right way to do it. The wireframes, I showed anybody who had 10 minutes. I carried around those tabloids, size piece of paper all around the hospital. You want to see my wireframes? You want to see my wireframes? People are like, what the hell? It's a wireframe. But I showed it to everyone, and that was part of the evangelizing.
Let's get to some Q&A, and I know that hopefully this has been, we've chopped a lot into an hour. So let's open it up here. Do we have a roving mic? I don't know. Do we? If not, I'm happy to give you mine.
Question. We will repeat the question.
Yes.
How did you build out the timeline for these different pieces?
How did we build out the timeline, Kristen?
Timeline. Well, we have an end date target in January, and so we kind of work backwards from that. We're getting into, like we said, we're in design right now, and we're going to be doing development sprints over the next couple months. So really working backwards from that target date. And it's been very fluid and very flexible, because sometimes we know we have to do these meetings with 8 different groups, And so that takes time. But if we knew they were coming, like Jen's done a great job of saying, oh my gosh, let's get them on the calendar now. So we have them a month out. So trying to project as much as we can, but that takes time. And so we've just taken the time because it's the right way to do it.
Yeah, if you had to try and make the organization and all those stakeholders stick to your timeline, you wouldn't get the insights and bad decisions would get made.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's been worth it to do it right.
But it's not also, like, I have a total phobia of, like, death by committee, right? This idea that, and that's part of, like, why on the designs we're not showing them to everyone. But part of it really is about bringing people in when you know you need to, and every other time just being like, nope, leave me alone, we're going, right? And trust me on this, we're gonna be fine, right? And so it's finding a great balance between those two. And so my job is to say, no, this is where we have to slow down and share with people, and this is where we're gonna just sort of fly under the radar and get stuff done and make decisions without telling people, and we'll catch them up later. That's my job, is to tell Kristen the two of those, and then Kristen takes that and goes, okay. And then I get really big, pretty, like, spreadsheets with sprints and timelines and deadlines and deliverables and calendars saying you must make this decision by this date or we are screwed. And so then I try to hit those dates.
I think it actually does say that.
It does, in big circle.
Right. Others?
You mentioned sprints, and I imagine that your IT department over in children's might do this year, or maybe waterfall. Did you guys have to know?
Yep.
So the question is, what development process was selected, Agile versus Waterfall versus Legacy? Combined.
Yeah, I mean, so we went into the project saying that we were going to do Agile.
Knowing that we weren't going to do it.
Knowing that we weren't actually going to do it. I mean, part of this is, again, I have some dedicated IT resources that I have actually pulled off of just core business work into this project. So the development is actually a combination of children's IT and then supplemental or augmented staff that Ciceron's helping us to staff with. And so, but even when you take, so Mike, my developer at Children's, even if I say I'm going to take him full time, like there is no full time when you're talking about a staff developer, because he still has to go to staff meetings, he still takes PTO, all of this other kind of stuff. So where we're really kind of landing is a agile-ish kind of approach. Of course, like seriously, if anyone's ever run a pure agile development, I want to meet you, because I've never met anyone that's like, yes, hardcore, pure agile, no watering it down. We're just going straight for it. So it's a little bit of waterfall. It's a little bit of waterfall and mostly agile is how we're going to take the approach. And it's really stressing IT out. I'm not going to lie to you. Like that's really stressing them out, and I have to talk them off the ledge every other week. So.
And what we can take from Agile, or what we have, is developing different components or different modules in the iterations. And so planning out those iterations, and we're working on some of those details right now, but planning out this is dependent upon this, and we need this in place, and VPN has to be figured out, and servers, and all of those, everything that has to be set up, we've taken it in kind of manageable chunks. And that's been sort of our version of Agile for this, because, I've never met anyone who actually does a pure Agile.
It's a challenge. Who's done it, right?
Others?
Oh, Joe.
Back to the selling it to the organization. What's the financial justification they use for the investment?
Oh, God. Mobile, I mean, so this is, I was talking about this prior to the event. This site is not a complex build. Kristen has said this before too, that it's a content site. We're not doing anything crazy like e-commerce. So our conversions don't actually have a financial model behind it, right? Our conversions are very watered down. There's an obvious understanding of the relationship between what people experience on our website and through mobile apps and that sort of thing, and how they feel when they come in, because we hear about it in evaluations. Kendall hears about it at the front desk. Physicians hear about it when they're seeing patients. So people are making that connect, but it is not a financial driver. I wish I had a financial, to say for every patient family I convert, that's worth $7 to the organization. I don't care what the number is, but if I had a number, that would really have changed how I went out about it. So the financial model really sucks, to be honest with you. At Children's, it was, here's what we're gonna spend. We're not actually gonna be able to prove that we're improving revenue at all. Cool, right? And they were like, cool, awesome. Because there was a broader understanding of the role that the web plays in the patient-family experience, in the way that referring physicians feel about us. I mean, our outreach team is like, you would not believe what the conversations are like when we go out and meet with the doctor to say, hey, when you've got cardiovascular patients or cancer patients, you should be sending them to us. And then we pull out our website, and our director of outreach has to pinch and do the pinching on the website to show them stuff. Like, that is a real cost, even if there's not a dollar behind it. So,
I think reputation as well.
Yeah.
And that's where those anecdotes come into play, right? You can have best-in-class physicians, you can have best-in-class technology, you can have best-in-class sort of reputation in the business, but if you have a really horrible sort of digital experience to all of that, that's a gigantic brand disconnect.
Yeah.
And you can demonstrate that. And everybody can understand, well, yeah, it's not like, 2% of our people use websites, right? They can pretty much say, yeah, everybody's experiencing it this way. And frankly, and I hate doing projects this way, but I get it. If you have a strong competitor who launches something, and like, hopefully the way all of Children's competitors feel next year, that's gonna be an impetus. They're gonna be like, oh man, we're getting killed, right? And that's a driver as well. But I think it does, because you know it, right? You know it and you feel it and you try and use it, and you can see, man, if I'm frustrated like this, imagine if I had a choice between Children's and Gillette. I'll just say it, right? And I'm getting everything I need there, they're anticipating my needs, and over here it seems like a lot of work. I wonder how much work it's gonna be once I get there. They start to put some doubt in their mind. That's part of that customer journey, that needs awareness sort of moment. It's like, I don't want to have any negative experiences. My child is bleeding, my child is sick, whatever. I want everything to be perfect, because you get a little bit obsessive if you're talking about your child. Oh, great.
Yeah. So you talked about about a half a dozen metrics and KPIs you identified to measure patient family experience. Can you care to share what those were?
My favorite, or?
So these are some of the KPIs that we measure.
Yeah, some of the KPIs. Returning visits is something that resonates with people.
Well, okay, so we should be clear. So there's digital KPIs, and then there's like hospital KPIs. And so, I mean, hospital KPIs are pretty technical, and they have to do with like readmit rates, low readmit rates, and low infection rates, and all sorts of different kinds of things. When we think about our KPIs, then I think returning visits is really important for us.
We looked at another one that I think is helpful is page views per visit. Kind of gets to that time on site, but not using time on site. So how many pages are they consuming while they're there? Or page depth is another one. How deep do they get? How many pages do they consume? The mobile traffic, of course, is a huge one.
The other one that's related but not related is, for us, one of the big KPIs is share of voice. We're in a very competitive, there are 3 children's hospitals in this market. Like, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. And so share of voice in terms of social, digital, just like what's being talked about out there in the world is a huge KPI for us. And it is related to the redesign we're doing in that we think and talk about a lot, like, what's the shareability of this? How are people gonna talk about this or use this or share this? Sometimes sharing that means, it's the Facebook and the Twitter and the LinkedIn and the Pinterest and all that kind of stuff, but it also is, sharing is emailing it. And because, if you have a kid with a serious health condition, you're not Facebooking somebody and tagging them and saying, hey, check this out, right? You're emailing them something saying, here's something I learned today. Being able to have our clinicians being able to print things easily and be able to carry that. Like, those don't seem like real obvious KPIs, but those are numbers I'm gonna watch, right? Like, what pages are getting printed? What pages are getting emailed? Not just what's getting shared out there in the world. And the other one,
emails from the grandmother-in-laws?
Yes, that one too. Here's how you should parent your child, right? Those are valid. The other one that's interesting for us and we haven't talked about is how Insight Search works and how people are using that. So if they're using Insight Search for really basic things like locations and maps and directions, then I feel like that's a negative, right? We've done something wrong. But Insight Search as a tool to really help navigate deep content is a plus, right? So when they're coming and using that search bar, because that's what people are used to, right? They see the little Google thing and they're like, cool, I can search for this really obscure keyword term and find all the places on this site that it appears. And so looking at some of those things I think are also really important. Those are some of the things that we keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'd like to double up on that one too. Just I think that if you have a search function on your site, dig deep into doing keyword analysis on what people are looking for. Because sometimes what they're looking for isn't even in your navigation.
Yeah.
And so that's going to immediately just be a warning signal to say, well, they're trying to find something that we didn't even know they were looking for. I'm sure that happened for you.
Well, we found out that like 60% of our users were using Insight Search at first. That like totally was like a dagger. Because I'm like, oh, that means we have a poorly laid out site. Well, sort of. And then if you can look at it and make that distinction between the stuff that they should be able to navigate to quicker, that's the stuff we ought to fix. The deep stuff, maybe that's okay that they're searching.
Hey, there was a time where Jen said, we could bypass this whole complicated project.
I just want a site with a big search box on it.
Yeah, she
That's
just
all
wanted a children's logo and a search box. And we're not that far off right now.
Yeah, the brand team wasn't real keen on that, so that was fine, whatever.
Right. Do you have a question, Seth?
Sure. From a decision support perspective, like you're comparing you guys to Gillette.
Mm-hmm.
And so the discussion around consumer ratings, quality, surface information, and people coming in through doctors.
Yeah. So the question's about how much like consumer rating tools factor in, especially in a competitive market. It's
and
really
rate your doctor.
And rate your doctor. It's really difficult in this market with healthcare because yes, we have 3 competitors, but we all have pretty different areas of expertise, right? So Gillette has a very niche market. Masonic is, really big in transplants. I mean, we have obviously lots of overlap of things. And so right now, that does not play in, that's not playing in the factor, but it's in the back of my head, because I kind of feel like we got to fix the foundation before we can start, building skyscrapers. And so that's where we're at. So it's on my radar. We just haven't really dug into it real deep. It also is like, I just am not convinced that like Yelp is where people are going to go looking for a pediatrician. They do. People talk about their pediatricians on Yelp. I'm just not sure that that's where people are going to go. So how do we think about that? And there's a new player every day in the like physician rating realm, and we gotta crack that nut. I'm just not quite sure where to place my bets yet.
I think they're more likely to go to Facebook, for example, and say, does anybody know a good pediatrician?
Right, which then gets back to share of voice, right? So like that's really kind of how we're thinking about it right now.
Right. Other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
So after the site launches, how are you thinking about like the ongoing maintenance and the governance around that?
Governance is one of our items on our big old task list.
Yeah, the question was, post-launch, what the hell are you guys going to do?
It's a great question. If anyone has any ideas. Now, I mean, that's part of why our team is growing, is that we are making space for that because we recognize governance is going to look different in the new site than it is in the old. And we're making some choices on, like right now, we don't have any kind of workflow or approval. Little secret for y'all. We don't even have a dev environment, so when we make changes, we're making changes to the live site. Super awesome.
This is the old site, not the new site.
I know.
Okay?
I like to live dangerously, right? Like it's terrifying, right? So we're adding in some things like review, different kinds of roles. There'll be a staging environment where we can have different sort of inputs. And so our hope is that we can hand the keys over to a few more people than we do right now, because we are in a live environment. Making changes, we hold that pretty close to the vest. We'll be able to release it a little bit. But I don't want to release it too much because I don't want to stray too much and I don't want to end up right back where we are now, right? I want us to have a little bit of that quality control, so that's part of what we're trying to sort of strike the balance on as we define workflows and approval processes and staging environments and how that publishing process will go.
One of the items that Jen just reminded me is the calendar. There's a lot of things that happen in children's that are managed by different departments. So we're trying to centralize them all on one calendar so that you can tag them and streamlines the whole back end, but then how do we get things on the calendar? And
How do we
puts
make
it
sure
there?
that, like, and Jimmy, how do we make sure that the bake sales don't go on the calendar, right? I mean, like, departments will have bake sales. It's awesome, great. Does not belong on the children's calendar, right? The big web, so
They
like
make a
some
good
of it
pie.
is, well, yeah, there is good pie, but I mean, at the same time, you know, we got to draw the line somewhere. And so some of it is in policies, some of it is in who we give controls to, and then some of it is in an approval process too, right? Making sure that whoever's approving new content or new pages, that number of people is very closely controlled, and they're doing things that are on brand, that have the consumer at focus, and can push back and say, you know what, we're not going to add this page or this section or this or whatever. We're going to do it. We're going to do it a different way that is more on brand and consumer focused.
Okay. Oh, one last one. You're the last question.
Okay, thanks. So how can video help relieve some of your stress?
I don't know. How can video help relieve some of my stress?
I think it can cut your pages a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about that, especially with just how video, the rise of video within social, and so we're thinking about video in a pretty different way, I think, heading into 2016. Right now, a lot of what we use it is very brand anthem-y, you know. If you haven't seen the video of the oncology nurses doing the Rachel Platten fight song, you should go out. You know, it's on our site. You know, it's on YouTube. It's on Vimeo. But it tends to be more of that stuff that we feature, and less around, you know, sort of these little snippets, more informational. And I think we're going to start to shift that a little bit. We're playing around with that a little bit right now, to be able to have some of these more multimedia pieces that can pull people into the site, right? So you can see, for example, Patsy Stinchfield, our infectious diseases expert, answering why you should get the measles in, you know, 30 seconds or less, but then draw you into the site and get the measles immunization, I should say. Good Lord, get me some coffee. But you know, and then to draw in and find out, you know, the real information about the measles vaccine and that kind of stuff. So I think that's going to be a shift for us.
And video's been on our technical radar the whole time.
Oh, absolutely. So number one, I think.
Yeah,
we were like, how are we handling video?
Yeah, we pick a platform, and there's some restrictions, you know, in terms of what the people inside the hospital can see, what environments they can access. So
Yeah.
picking the platform and making sure that we're accommodating it, because it's definitely one of those kind of running stages once we get walking and crawling and walking.
Plus, you know, if you do a Google search for, image search for kind doctor, you know, it's that stately gentleman usually, and you know, with the pocket square and the pocket protector. Pocket square is nice. It's a whole new brand thing. But anyways, like, you know, and it's just like not human, right? It's like stock imagery. And so humanizing the children's brand. You know, the truth of the matter is some of the very best surgeons in the world have some of the worst or bedside manners, right? I'm not saying in children's, right? But especially in adult medicine, right? And so humanizing this brand, like if I have a child who's sick, I want to see from the doctor, like in their own voice, a comforting voice. And you know, reading text in a bio can't do that quite like a video can. So I think that's, you know, as we humanize these touch points in the journey, it's hugely important. Okay, first let's give a big round of applause to these